girls and our women innovators across 20 plus countries. Welcome. Namaskar. Today we have a very interesting and unique panel. The topic of the panel is women technology and education. My name is Abhinav Tandon, luckiest man ever, and doing my small efforts to build solutions for Bharat. We have with us two doyens, two personalities across the spectrum of tech world of India. We have with us Pradeep Gupta sir. He's the youngest member in the panel, but he's also called the Great Dawn or Bhishma Pitama of India's startup ecosystem. His introduction is too big for this session to include, but I'll summarize. He's the chairman of India's leading tech-based media house called Cyber Media Limited, which publishes leading dailies like Voice and Data, Data Quest, PC Quest. We've all grown learning about the industry, reading from those magazines. He's also the co-founder of one of India's biggest seed stage fund called Indian Angel Network, also the global trustee of the Indus Entrepreneurs, and of course, an investor and mentor in a lot of startups, and a super senior from our college. Welcome, Pradeep sir. Welcome to the session. And for the rest of the session, I'll call him PD sir. And we also have Ms. Gazal Kalra. Ms. Gazal is an alumni of IIT Delhi, has built $1 billion tech venture, is a very wonderful tech entrepreneur, has a passion for doing pro bono consulting and building sustainable tech-based ventures. And if you've been reading about her views on communities and women empowerment, she also brings a lot of insight and a new age perspective on how do we look at technology and education for women empowerment. Welcome, Gazal. It's a pleasure to have you on the panel.
Thank you.
All right. So I'll start not with ladies first, but seniors first. Pradeep, sir, you have been watching Indian industry in technology right from inception, probably when we had those big IBM and Wipro boxes to today when we have the highest subscriber base for mobile 4G broadband in the world. How do you think technology landscape has evolved in so many years? And have you actually seen role of women in technology-based ventures increasing in India, or do you think there's a lot more to be done? Over to you.
No, so absolutely. I've seen a stark change taking place in the entire landscape of technology and the startup ecosystem. Let me first sort of share about the technology ecosystem. I remember when I became an entrepreneur in 1980. At that time, there were hardly any women entrepreneurs, and there were hardly any women who were there in the tech sector. But, some sort of a transformation started taking place in the 80s. Some women started coming to the fore and so on. But still, there was this glass ceiling. So at the entry level, you might find that there was a balance. But then after that, in this, you look at the senior levels and you would find that, the same kind of percentages did not hold true. However, it was during those times that some role models started appearing, person like Neelam Dhawan, for example, right? And I remember in Data Quest, we used to do these stories, 10 women in the tech industry, and, who are likely to become CEOs of the future and stuff like that. And few of the names started appearing. And then gradually you find that, from about the turn of the millennium, that is the time when there was a big shift that started taking place and more women started coming in at the senior level also. And today, you look at, if I look at the Indian operations of IBM has had a woman head, HP has had a woman head. You can just rattle them off your fingertips and you will find that there are at least, senior level VPs, there are senior level CEOs of Indian operations of various IT companies have had women in those roles. So I think there is this transformation has taken place. On the startup ecosystem, once again, when we formed a tie here in India, At that time, there were hardly any women entrepreneurs. And so in the 2000s, we used to have these panels on, women entrepreneurship and, life work balance and stuff like that. And then I think it was around about 15 years back that we said, hey, listen, why are we sort of, creating separate forum? Why don't we actually make it into a target that every panel will have a woman? Instead of saying that, we'll have a panel on women entrepreneurship, why should we not have a woman on every panel? And that indeed has happened over the last 10 years. And if you look at now the type programs, you will find that every panel has got a woman on it, and a deserving woman. So that is the kind of a transformation that has taken place.
Yes, of course. I've seen it personally. Even in last 4 years, I've seen the panels in Thai summits, especially Thai Cons and Thai Global Summit. The participation has really, really increased, and you see that diversity in the verticals being represented by women as well. So very interesting to get that perspective, PG sir. Now, Gazal, you studied in India, worked in India, then you went abroad and came back and uh, probably built a very, very unique venture. I think your company has a lot of international patents also, a lot of innovations also, and you've tried to solve a India-centric problem. What made you come back to India? What made you decide that after studying in the States, you will build something in India? And was it a passion to do something for country, or did you find India to be amenable for women to make a difference, or did you actually face a lot of challenges, but you still had the drive and you made it
Right. Thanks, Vinay, for the question, which is, if I heard it right, is what made me want to come back, given I had a full option of being in the US after my education. So I think it was just love for India. I, grew up, I'm an army officer's daughter. So, patriotism runs in my blood. So, of course, I could not go back and join the services and sort of, serve the nation through that. But there was something about that this is home, this is the country I want to be in and create impact in. And added to that, the fact that, I just felt it was, a land of opportunities. I mean, a young demographic at the inflection point of, tech disruption through tech. When I went, I think people were still using like the first version of smartphones, and when I came back, there was just this you could feel the energy in the youth around you, and people wanted to do things that were built in India for India and globally. So I just felt like the aspiration, the talent pool was something that I would never get anywhere outside. So it was both a mix of both the reasons. And third, of course, I love Indian food, so that's always a big puller, for people. I know that even in the US, a lot of my American friends loved Indian food. So I was like, where can you get, better food than this, and just being back in India. So those were my reasons to be back.
Who knew this would be the reason? You can take a Punjabi out of Punjab, but how can you take Punjabi food out of a Punjabi? But yeah, interesting. But Ghazal, when you came back, since you had worked before you went out and you had seen the ecosystem, do you think after coming back, the internet and the technology and the power of smartphone getting into almost everyone's hand actually enabled and made it easier for you to do things in India?
Yes, so I think from an ecosystem point of view, I came back in 2014. So that was, I think, the wave one of sort of startups coming out of India, entrepreneurs, unicorns, right? I think in 2014, there were maybe 1 or 2 unicorns when we started out in the country. So, it was right at the inflection point of sort of wave one of entrepreneurship ecosystem in India. Having said that, frankly, and I often say this, that leadership is lonely, and it's even lonelier for women, and entrepreneurship is lonely and even lonelier for women entrepreneurs. The data still is abysmal, and I'm not going to, for the audience, paint any rosy picture that, things have changed. 65% of women start I mean, there are systemic biases in women starting out. Women are at a disadvantage of raising early stage funding. I recently read an article in the US which said that, funding in women-led startups at an all-time high. But when you read the article, it says that, out of all the VC funding, 1.87% went to women-led funded businesses. Oh, by the way, it's like 30 basis points more than, last year. And I thought it was just a completely ill-worded article, because what you should be talking about is this really the representation of how the startup ecosystem should reflect equality of women? So there are biases both on, and it's the same. I don't see any women investor decision makers in any of the leading funds, whether in India or outside. So the data is abysmal, but as an entrepreneur, you're always an optimist, and what inspires me is the stories, and the stories that I saw before I started out, and made it easier for me. Is it easy? No. But will the next generation of women find it easier? It's just through the stories. If you sit down and look at the data, you'll be actually disappointed. And that's what gives me, hope that the initiative that this is, right, which is actually creating more of these stories, more of these communities, so that the data starts to change. You start moving the needle on data, where a woman entrepreneur can actually, without any baggage, just walk into a VC meeting and say, I'm and demand for equal opportunity, and not be straddled with questions like, oh, what about if you get married and if you have children, who's going to run your startup, and do you have a male co-founder who's a hedge against anything that goes wrong? So it is quite bad. But hey, I've never met a woman who's not strong. So whether they're working, whether they are managing homes, I just find like women can do anything if they set their heart out to it.
Very well said, Gazal. That's why I've been telling 50. I told her last year also, men and women are not equal. Women are superior. And taking a cue from what Gazal said, PG sir, about the ecosystem. So we have seen technology ecosystem evolve, and the data point she's mentioning, I think there is a report which Womennovator only had mentioned, that of all the delta that we have seen, the rise in number of startups, only 14% of the new startups are women-led startups or women co-founded startups. And that's abysmal. I mean, considering the number of the potential that we have in the country, I think we cannot actually realize our own true potential. If I have to speak like a full capitalist also, we cannot achieve it if we have equal representation. And if I have to speak like the way I want to, I think it's a very, very big blunder that we are not taking care of it and bringing more systemic changes. I think, Tripti, that's also another cue for you. Ghazal had said we don't see any representation of women or sufficient representation in decision making in the funds, and you should launch your 50 crore women centric, women led fund very, very soon. So मैंने अच्छा नाम भी दिया उसको, Women Investment Network, WIN. So that's one initiative that we are trying to take, that we have a fund for women by women of women. Maybe they would be able to empathize with the struggles or unforeseen challenges and seen challenges a little better. But PG sir, this technology about education. We are in a COVID world now, and we've seen the shift to digital modes of education. The shift is not only in education, but in how we work also. Like Google has said that they might go for a 3+2 work day, 3 days from office and 2 days from home. And this might become the new normal. A lot of strides are being taken in education technology also. We could never have thought that within first 10 years of operation, any Indian company would become a leader in the world in that sector. Byju's and Vedantu's have become leaders in education sector driven by technology, which is a big achievement for the country. How do you see the role of education aided by technology in empowering women a little more? Because 14% of women entrepreneurship is one number, but if you look at education level, the dropouts in higher senior secondary schools and college, the percentage is very, very high amongst women as well. And maybe women want to study, but they are not allowed to due to the problems that we have. So, do you see technology playing a key role in empowering women a lot more in education as well?
So absolutely. But Abhinav, before I answer this question on EdTech, let me just address some of the points that Gazal raised and some of the points that you raised. Okay.
Sure.
Absolutely necessary to create an ecosystem, absolutely necessary to make systemic changes. And things are changing. I mean, when I was at the IIT, out of the total batch of 250, there were 0 women. Okay. In my own electrical engineering batch of 50, again, 0, because the overall number was 0. Abhinav, when you were at the IIT, how many women were there in your batch?
Very less, sir. हम तो ये कहते थे कि रोड जा रही है, women go and take a right towards IIFT, और IIT की तरफ कोई आता ही नहीं. But I think we had around 20% of the
20 or so. And Gazal, by the time you graduated, what was that number?
I think it was similar, really. 50.
Okay. So my point basically is that
20%.
that it takes for systemic changes to take place, for an ecosystem to change, it takes a generation, at least. I have seen the same kind of a thing happening. I was giving you the example of information technology industry. If you look at the numbers today, those numbers are much better in terms of the senior leadership role. Mind you, it's still not 50%, okay? And it should be. So still we need to keep on chipping away at various kind of things, and we need to create more role models, and we need to therefore also create the right infrastructure and facilities available so that these questions of what will happen when you get married, who will look after the children and stuff like that, all of those start getting addressed systemically. Okay, and I think it will take generations. And Gazal, for instance, in the community today, you have Vani Kola of Kalari Capital. So, you are having now women heading investment companies and taking those decisions. So, yes, again, if you look at all the VCs, that represents maybe 1 point whatever percent of the investors. But it is changing, and I think we need to keep on working towards it to ensure that transformation takes place. Coming to your question about EdTech, so absolutely, I mean, the last 2 years have been a bonanza in a way for technology, and I think the biggest change that has happened is that it changed the mindset. There were lots of things which were earlier possible, and technology existed for doing those. I mean, work from home could have been done 3 years back also, right? But we had these mental blocks, and suddenly we found ourselves faced to the wall. There was no other option but to work in a certain manner, and therefore the technology already existed. We took those solutions, we implemented it, and therefore I say that last 2 years, the biggest lesson which has been there is that the change as far as the thinking is concerned, the mindset change that has taken place. So, digital transformation, which was being talked about for the last 2 decades, there was no other option but to transform. Okay. And companies did it at rapid speeds. So suddenly in 3 days, my entire company was, people were working remotely, and, we put in software to ensure that, objectives were set and people were, following those objectives and so on. Similarly in EdTech, rapid changes started taking place as far as the education technology is concerned. And, whether it was remote education delivery, whether it was proctoring, whether it was examination system, whether it was recruitment, whether it was placement, the different blocks of the EdTech, all of them got transformed. Okay. And I think going ahead, we will need to look at hybrid models, because, there are certain things that has got missed out because of EdTech also, because there is a huge amount of We always used to say that at the IIT, we learned much more in the hostel than what we learned in the classroom, right? So now if that hostel is not there, where is that part of learning going, right? So that is why we will probably need to now look at various kind of hybrid solutions.
Very well said, sir. I think you've touched upon an important point. I think world leaders are saying this, that learning happens outside of the campus or outside of the classroom. It is social behavior modulation and social skills that you learn in that environment that shouldn't get missed out in a tech driven environment. Uh, Very interesting. And you're right. I think except Vani and Padmaja, there are very few names. Names are coming. It's better than before, but aren't seeing those names. But Ghazal, you talked about stories, and those narratives are very, very important. There are so many women, Tripti did touch about that point, who were doing a lot of good work. The moment they got highlighted on a platform like this, and they were given digital marketing help, their websites were made and profiles were made, and they were introduced to technology driven sales, that is e-commerce. They faced a lot of resistance from their own households. So suddenly, when there is a lady in the house who's working and doing something, comes online and her digital presence increases, there's a bit of Isha also coming in. What we saw in Abhiman movie was probably something very glorified, but this kind of challenge also comes in when suddenly a woman entrepreneur or a leader sees a light of day using technology. A lot of unforeseen challenges also start coming in, interpersonal issues. But there are a lot of things that can be done at probably policy level. Like I was reading, maybe Swiggy or someone has introduced a 2-day menstruation leave for gig workers. So a lot of women are not becoming part of gig economy and doing deliveries because then they lose out on this. So they are not only giving those leaves, they are also giving a minimum guarantee of earning during that period. So maybe stories and policy level interventions maybe have to be raised up. Like your story is very nice, share it with more people, and also give suggestions. What do you think? We have already crossed 2020, which was the dream of APJ Abdul Kalam for a new India. What do you think you want to see in India in 2040 when your daughter has grown up? What do you want your daughter to feel in that new India? What changes do three top changes you want to see in the country for whatever she aspires to be, but as women leaders? What three changes would you want?
Um, I'll see this. What are the top three changes that I would like to see over the next 20 years would be very difficult to sort of point out in this, in this forum and make it relevant. But what I will say is, like, let's take in two parts. I think addressing the first part of your question, which is all the challenges that come up when women actually sort of, step out and take leadership roles, etc. Like I said, it's not easy and it's never going to be easy, but only the stories around you, the role models that you see will continue to inspire you. So women need inspiration at this point more than policy changes. And I mentioned it to even my company's HR when they wanted to do like diversity hiring, etc. And they said, let's create these policies, let's etc. I said only two things are needed in India. First is role models. That's it. No amount of policy and like stuff that I put on the walls and say we have this or that. Till a woman mid-manager sees that, the boardrooms are only big boys clubs and there are no women CXOs, they're not going to be inspired to stick in there, right? Like I've been in companies where I didn't have anybody to look up to, right? So till that the boardroom diversity starts changing, you will not see, mid managers sticking on in the company. They will say, oh, I'm okay to take career breaks. They will not have mentorship around. So it's only going to be role models, and therefore a lot of work needs to be done to bring up these stories. And there is, we should not just look at like whoever is in the news, that those are the stories to capture. I think the grassroots stories need to be brought out equally and more importantly, because they are more relatable and more relevant, right? The second thing is, safety in India. I think if the only thing that I want to see for my daughter over the next 20-30 years is really that India becomes a safer nation for women. Everything else follows. The truth is that women in rural India, girls in rural India cannot continue secondary education is because their parents are scared of sending them to the village next by. And unfortunately, in our country, you cannot create secondary schools in every village. So the mobility hinders access to opportunities. Yes, online and tech breaks those barriers where online education can practically reach every village, but then you're basically sort of saying that there is that you can only do like remote online work. So if there was just one thing that I wish for this country is to make the country safer for women.
Very interesting and very good to hear it from you. Very well put also. And uh, I heard this word in our latest venture around 3 months back, Big Boys Club. It just so happened that over the course of building that venture, we had only two women, and somehow we became five men as part of the founding team. And I heard this word, and it hit me hard. Uh, and that's where we said, let's push and let's actually put in place. These are the five roles we need, and we'll only take women. Because I
Yeah.
felt this is two versus five. If it becomes 20 versus 50 in the same office, then a lot of things will get sidelined. How we approach the timings and
Yeah.
safety and other.
And to that point, I'll just add, so the number that you should be tracking is not the policy changes that companies are doing. I mean, it's great, and all great work being done by a few of these companies is to really say how many are walking the talk, how many have 50% board members as women, how many have 50% CXOs as women. I think those are the metrics to track, and that should be what will really drive. Once you've done that, you don't need to do anything else, because when people have somebody to get inspired by, magic happens.
Very good point, Gazal. I think I have also taken note of this that, besides policy, you should see the actual result. And that's what we also tried to do. We did not make any policy. That was more laziness than uh, informed decision. Now, from 2 to 5, we have become 10 to 5. So we have more women in that company than we have men. And we've seen the environment change as well. We've seen over a course of a month that how the office also got aligned to those realities. But I think we have 4 minutes. We'll have the last question, probably same for you, PG sir, what I asked Kajal, that you've seen a lot of changes coming in India. आपने वो STD PCO पे सिक्के डालने से लेके हेलो सीरी कॉल धवल वाला जनरेशन चेंज देखा है. What are the changes by 2040 you would want to see in India for your granddaughter and rest of the women leaders to feel better and be better in our country? What is your wish list to say?
So absolutely, I 100% agree with the points that Gazal is been making. We need to not just have policies, but we need to have lots of other things going around with that. You do require some sort of to implement any good policy, you require a good slogan, right? You need the right program, and you need the right measures. All right, because it's very easy. The moment you say, 50%, then 50% at what level? Companies will prove that at the lower level, they probably hire 60% women and 40% men, and so on. And so therefore, they'll put together statistics. But it's important to have those matrices at different kind of levels, that, how many women are there at the board level and so on. And it is changing. So, over the next 2 decades, the kind of change that I visualize happening is, and it starts from the first level, which is education, right? So at education, we need much more of women getting into technical education, right? We need to and as Gazal rightly said, safety is a big issue. So all those and the right infrastructure to ensure that women get into education, into higher education, once again, if you look at the statistics there, you will find that there is a stark difference between women which are there in primary and secondary education and higher education. So that percentage needs to change, right? So one is that change that needs to take place. Second is at the corporate level. Increasingly, of course, now it is mandated that you must have a woman in the board, right? But do I have 50% women on my board? No. So, we need to start making those changes and ensure that there are 50% women on the board. And as I said earlier, that these changes will take time. So I really see the next generation as the defining generation where, with our generation, I would say that the beginning was made and, acceptability was there. Now that acceptability has to start getting translated into numbers. That's what I want to see over the next 2 decades.
Very well put, sir. And that's why I said that this panel is very, very unique. Whatever suggestions you both are giving, we are taking them very, very seriously. We do get the opportunity to interact with powers that be, and we take it very, very seriously. And both these thought processes will be given to the right ministries as well as an input. What we need is people like you actually share your stories and give your inputs. And you made a very, very good point that, like Gazal said, besides false, you need numbers, but numbers should also be reflecting the reality, which can bring in the actual change. Numbers should be at every level and not only for whitewashing and painting. And since you said एक अच्छा slogan चाहिए होता है, we have only 30 seconds left, so we will end with a slogan that I think Atmanirbhar Bharat, which is our new key theme in becoming a Vishwa Guru. I think we cannot have Atmanirbhar Bharat. We have Atmanirbhar Aurat. And we all have a very, very big responsibility to play. Change begins at home. So let's do whatever we can, and we will make sure we take your feedback and suggestions very, very seriously and take it at the right level. But thank you so, so very much for taking time out and doing this rendezvous today with us for Womennovator. Thank you, Gazal, and thank you, PG sir. And hope to see you next year as well. And probably we will have 10,000 women leaders selected by that time.